The first slap came without warning as Mackenzie Turner's words hung in the stale kitchen air of her uncle's ranch house, just outside Eureka, California, in the spring of 1876. Her cheek stung with the force of it, but the pain wasn't unfamiliar. Speaking her mind in this house always came with consequences. No decent man will ever want you if you can't learn to hold that tongue of yours, Uncle Vernon spat, his weathered face contorted with anger. Your parents would be ashamed of what you've become. Mackenzie steadied herself against the rough-hewn table, tasting blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek. At 22, she'd endured 6 years of her uncle's discipline since her parents' deaths from typhoid fever. She brushed a strand of copper-brown hair from her face and lifted her chin, refusing to let him see her cry. "My father taught me to speak the truth," she said, her voice softer but no less determined. "And my mother would have agreed that selling off our family's eastern pasture without consulting me isn't right. Half of this ranch is rightfully mine." Vernon's face darkened. "Ungrateful girl, I've put a roof over your head, clothes on your back. The law says I manage this property until you marry, and that's what I'll do. Now get to your chores before I give you something real to complain about." Mackenzie swallowed her retort and slipped out the back door into the crisp morning air. The Sierra Nevada mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow even as spring blossoms dotted the valley below. She had once loved this land with all her heart, but now it felt more like a prison than a home. She made her way to the chicken coop, gathering eggs with trembling hands as she considered her options. There weren't many for a woman alone in 1876. Marriage seemed the only escape, but the local prospects held little appeal, and Vernon had already rejected 2 suitors he deemed unsuitable, men who might have given Mackenzie more freedom than her uncle thought proper for a woman. "Miss Turner." The unfamiliar voice startled her, and Mackenzie nearly dropped her basket of eggs. She turned to find a tall stranger standing at the chicken coop entrance. His clothes were trail-worn but clean dark trousers, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing tanned forearms, and a well-shaped Stetson hat that he promptly removed when she met his eyes. "I'm sorry to frighten you, madam," he said. "Your uncle hired me yesterday. I'm the new ranch hand, Yates Logan." Mackenzie took his measure quickly. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-streaked brown hair and eyes the color of a summer storm. His face was pleasantly weathered, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now as he studied her face with undisguised concern. "Your cheek," he said quietly. "Are you all right, Miss Turner?" Mackenzie's hand flew up to cover the mark she knew was reddening there. "I'm fine, Mr. Logan. Just clumsy this morning. Welcome to Willow Creek Ranch." He nodded, though his eyes said he didn't believe her explanation for a moment. "Your uncle mentioned you'd show me around, get me acquainted with the daily operations." "Did he now?" Mackenzie couldn't keep the edge from her voice. Vernon hadn't mentioned hiring anyone, much less assigning her to train him. Another decision made without her input. "Well then, Mr. Logan, let's get started. The day won't wait on us." As they walked toward the horse barn, Mackenzie felt his eyes on her, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "How long have you been working ranches, Mr. Logan?" she asked, hoping to direct his attention elsewhere. "Since I was 16, madam. Started in Texas, worked my way through Colorado, Nevada, and now California. Been riding the trail for nearly 10 years. And what brings you to Eureka?" He was quiet for a moment. "Looking for something new, I suppose. Got tired of the constant moving. Thought I might settle somewhere for a spell." Mackenzie led him into the barn where the morning light filtered through cracks in the wooden slats. The familiar smell of hay and horses was comforting. "These are our working horses," she explained, gesturing to the stalls. "That black gelding is Thunder, he's mine. The sorrel mare belongs to Uncle Vernon, the others are for ranch work." Yates ran a hand along the neck of a sturdy bay. "Fine animals. Your family's been here long." "My parents established this ranch 25 years ago. They were among the first settlers in this valley after the gold rush brought people to Eureka." She paused, something in his gentle manner encouraging her to continue. "They died 6 years ago. My uncle, my father's brother, came from Sacramento to take over until I marry." "I'm sorry for your loss," Yates said, and the simple sincerity in his voice nearly undid her. "Thank you." Mackenzie moved briskly toward the tack room. "You'll need to know where everything is kept." "We start at dawn each day." For the next hour, she showed him around the ranch, the corrals, the grazing areas, the creek that supplied their water, the small orchard her mother had lovingly planted. Yates asked intelligent questions and listened attentively to her answers, showing none of the dismissive attitude she'd come to expect from men when she discussed ranch business. "You know a great deal about running this place," he commented as they walked back toward the main house. "I should. I've lived here my entire life, and my father made sure I understood every aspect of ranching. He believed women were just as capable as men of managing land and livestock." She didn't add that her uncle's views were decidedly different. Yates nodded thoughtfully. "My mother ran our farm after my father died in the war. Smartest person I ever knew." Before Mackenzie could respond, Vernon's voice boomed from the porch. "Girl, get in here and start on dinner. Logan, I need you to help mend the north fence line." Mackenzie felt heat rise to her face at being summoned like a child, but she forced a calm expression. "I'd better go. The tools for fence mending are in the shed behind the barn." As she turned to leave, Yates spoke quietly. "Miss Turner, thank you for the tour. I look forward to working with you." There was something in his tone, respect, perhaps, that made her pause. "You're welcome, Mr. Logan." Throughout the afternoon, as she kneaded bread dough and prepared stew for supper, Mackenzie found her thoughts returning to the new ranch hand. There was something different about him, a gentleness combined with quiet strength that intrigued her. But she quickly scolded herself for such foolish musings. Getting involved with a ranch hand would only invite more of Vernon's wrath. And besides, Yates Logan was likely just passing through, like most cowboy types. When Vernon and Yates came in for supper, her uncle immediately launched into complaints about the day's work, the condition of the fence line, the price of cattle, and a dozen other grievances. Mackenzie served the food silently, keeping her eyes down and her expression neutral. She'd learned it was the safest way to navigate meals with her uncle. "This stew tastes like dishwater," Vernon grumbled, though he continued eating heartily. "You're getting careless with your cooking, girl." "I think it's excellent, Miss Turner," Yates said, his voice casual but firm. "Reminds me of my mother's cooking. She always said a good stew needed time and patience." Vernon scowled at the interruption but said nothing more about the food. Instead, he began interrogating Yates about his experience and background. Mackenzie listened carefully as Yates explained that he'd worked on some of the biggest ranches in Texas before the wanderlust took him. "Got no family left," he explained. "Parents gone, no siblings. Been on my own since I was 17. "Well, as long as you work hard and follow orders, you'll do fine here," Vernon said. "I run a tight operation, no room for slackers or troublemakers." "Yes, sir, I understand." After supper, Vernon announced he was going into town for a meeting at the saloon, which Mackenzie knew meant he'd be drinking and playing cards late into the night. As soon as his wagon pulled away, she felt the tension in her shoulders ease. These evenings alone were precious, the only time she felt truly free in her own home. She was washing the dishes when a knock came at the back door. Yates stood there, hat in hand. "I apologize for disturbing you, Miss Turner. I just wanted to return this." He held out a small handkerchief. "You dropped it during our tour this morning." "Oh, thank you." She reached for it, acutely aware of how their fingers brushed. Instead of leaving, he hesitated. "May I speak frankly, Miss Turner?" Mackenzie tensed but nodded. "I saw what happened this morning, before I introduced myself." His eyes were serious, concerned. "Your uncle struck you." She turned away, busying herself with the dishes again. "Mr. Logan, I appreciate your concern, but family matters are private." "With all due respect, madam, a man hitting a woman isn't a family matter. It's wrong." The directness of his statement startled her. No one had ever acknowledged Vernon's treatment of her so plainly. "My circumstances are complicated, Mr. Logan. My uncle is my legal guardian until I marry. He controls my inheritance, this ranch, everything. That doesn't give him the right to hurt you." Mackenzie put down the dish she was drying and faced him. "What would you have me do? I have nowhere else to go, no means to support myself independently. The law gives women precious few options." Yates was quiet for a moment. "I understand difficult situations, Miss Turner. I've been in a few myself. I just wanted you to know that. Well, that someone sees what's happening and cares." The simple kindness of his words threatened to undo her carefully maintained composure. "Thank you, Mr. Logan. That means more than you know." He nodded and settled his hat back on his head. "Good night, Miss Turner." "Good night." After he left, Mackenzie sat at the kitchen table for a long time, her mind whirling with conflicting emotions. No one had stood up for her in years, not since her parents died. The sensation was both comforting and terrifying. What would Vernon do if he discovered his new hand had challenged his authority? And why did Yates Logan care about the welfare of a woman he'd just met? Sleep eluded her that night as she considered these questions and others. When dawn broke, she rose and dressed with a strange sense of anticipation for the day ahead. Over the next few weeks, Yates proved himself to be a capable and hardworking ranch hand. He tackled the most difficult tasks without complaint, showed a genuine care for the animals, and demonstrated an impressive knowledge of cattle and horses. What surprised Mackenzie most, however, was his attitude toward her. Unlike Vernon and the other occasional workers they hired, Yates treated her as an equal partner in the ranch's operation. He sought her opinion on matters, deferred to her knowledge of the property, and subtly positioned himself between her and Vernon whenever her uncle's temper flared. Vernon seemed oblivious to this dynamic, focused as he was on the ranch's productivity. With Yates's help, they were getting more accomplished than they had in years. The spring cattle drive to market was approaching, and Vernon was determined to get top dollar for their herd. One morning in early May, Mackenzie was in the vegetable garden when Yates approached with a troubled expression. "Miss Turner, I just wanted to let you know that your uncle's planning to sell 30 head from the east pasture tomorrow." Mackenzie straightened, wiping dirt from her hands onto her apron. 30? That's too many. We need to keep at least half of those for breeding." "That's what I thought too, but he was quite insistent, said he needs the money for some investment opportunity in Sacramento." A cold feeling settled in Mackenzie's stomach. Vernon had been making increasingly reckless decisions with the ranch's resources, selling off land and livestock without reinvesting in the property. She suspected he was gambling away the proceeds, but couldn't prove it. "I'll talk to him," she said, though she dreaded the confrontation. "Would you like me to be present?" Yates asked quietly. The offer touched her. "No, but thank you. Some battles I need to fight myself." That evening, when Vernon returned from checking fence lines, Mackenzie approached him in his study. She'd prepared her arguments carefully, bringing the ranch ledger to show him the figures. "Uncle Vernon, I'd like to discuss tomorrow's cattle sale." He barely looked up from his whiskey. "What about it? 30 head is too many. If we sell that many from our breeding stock, we'll compromise next year's calves. I've done the calculations." She set the ledger before him. "We should keep at least 15 of those cows." Vernon's face reddened. "Are you telling me how to run my ranch, girl?" "It's our ranch," Mackenzie said, standing her ground. "And yes, I'm offering my informed opinion about a decision that affects our livelihood." The blow came fast, the back of his hand connecting with her cheek, sending her stumbling against the bookcase. The ledger fell to the floor, pages scattering. "You forget your place," Vernon snarled. "I decide what to sell and when to sell it. Your job is to cook, clean, and keep your opinions to yourself." Mackenzie tasted blood again but refused to cower. "My father would be ashamed to see how you're running this ranch into the ground. You're selling off our future piece by piece." Vernon stood, his bulk towering over her. "Your father was a fool who coddled you, filled your head with ideas above your station. No wonder you're still unwed at your age. What man would want a woman who can't keep her mouth shut?" His words hurt more than the slap. "Perhaps I remain unmarried because you've chased away any suitable man who showed interest in me. Or perhaps it's because you need my unpaid labor to keep this ranch functioning while you drink away our profits in town." The rage that filled Vernon's face terrified her, but Mackenzie held her ground. She'd endured years of his abuse, watched as he systematically dismantled everything her parents had built. Something inside her had finally broken. Vernon grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You ungrateful little Mr. Turner." The calm, steady voice from the doorway broke the tension. Yates stood there, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard as flint. "This doesn't concern you, Logan," Vernon growled, but he released Mackenzie's arm. "Actually, sir, I came to discuss the cattle drive route, but it seems I've interrupted something." Yates's gaze moved to Mackenzie, noting the red mark on her cheek and her disheveled appearance. "Miss Turner, I believe one of the horses is acting colicky. Would you mind taking a look while I speak with your uncle?" It was a transparent excuse, but Mackenzie seized it gratefully. "Of course, Mr. Logan. Uncle, we can continue our discussion later." Vernon waved her away dismissively, his attention already shifting to Yates. As she slipped past the cowboy in the doorway, his hand briefly touched hers, a gesture so quick and subtle that Vernon wouldn't have noticed, but one that conveyed silent support. Outside in the cool evening air, Mackenzie leaned against the porch railing, her heart racing. The confrontation had gone exactly as she'd feared, yet she couldn't bring herself to regret standing up to Vernon. What surprised her more was Yates's intervention. He'd somehow known she was in trouble and had created a perfect excuse to extract her from the situation. She made her way to the barn, knowing she should at least check on the horses to maintain the pretense. The animals were all fine, of course, but she stayed with them, finding comfort in their gentle presence. She was brushing Thunder's glossy coat when Yates found her half an hour later. "Are you all right?" he asked, closing the barn door behind him. "Yes, thank you for what you did." Yates moved closer, his expression troubled in the lantern light. "He shouldn't treat you that way. No one should." "What did you tell him?" "That I'd mapped out a better route for the cattle drive that would save us a day's travel. He was so pleased with the prospect that he forgot about being angry with you." Yates paused. "I also suggested that selling so many breeding cows would hurt our profit next year. Said I'd seen another ranch make the same mistake and regret it. He's reconsidering." Mackenzie stared at him in disbelief. "He listened to you." Yates shrugged. Men like your uncle often value a stranger's opinion over family, especially when that family is female. You risked your position here to help me. Some things matter more than a job, Miss Turner. The simple statement hung between them, loaded with meaning. In the soft glow of the lantern, with the comforting sounds of horses around them, Mackenzie felt a shift in their relationship, something deepening, strengthening. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Yates took a step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "Because you're the strongest, most determined woman I've ever met. Because you love this land and these animals with a passion that's rare. Because every time you speak your mind, despite knowing the consequences, I admire you more." He paused, then added quietly, "And because your voice is the most beautiful sound I've heard in all my travels." The unexpected tenderness of his words stole Mackenzie's breath. No one had ever spoken to her this way, with respect and admiration rather than criticism or condescension. "Mr. Logan, Yates," he corrected gently. "When we're alone, at least, I'd be honored if you called me Yates." Yates. His name felt right on her lips. "I'm Mackenzie." He smiled then, a warm, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Mackenzie, it suits you." For a moment they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged with possibility. Then, remembering where they were and the dangers of being discovered, Mackenzie stepped back. "I should return to the house. Vernon will be suspicious if I'm gone too long." Yates nodded. "Of course. But Mackenzie," he waited until she met his eyes again, "you don't have to face him alone anymore." That night, lying in her bed, Mackenzie replayed their conversation over and over. Yates Logan had come into her life like a sudden summer storm, disrupting the bleak pattern she'd resigned herself to. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope for something more than mere survival. The next morning, Vernon announced that he'd decided to sell only 20 cattle instead of 30. He presented the decision as his own idea, of course, but the slight nod Yates gave Mackenzie over breakfast told her all she needed to know. Something had changed on Willow Creek Ranch, and nothing would be the same again. As spring blossomed fully into summer, Mackenzie and Yates developed a careful routine. They worked side by side during the day, maintaining a respectful distance whenever Vernon was present. But in the early mornings, when mist still clung to the valley, or in the evenings when Vernon went to town, they would find moments to talk freely. Yates told her about his childhood in Texas, how his father had died fighting for the Confederacy, leaving his mother to raise him alone. He spoke of the years after her death, drifting from ranch to ranch, searching for something he couldn't name. Mackenzie shared stories of her parents, of happier times at Willow Creek, and her dreams of restoring the ranch to its former prosperity. What began as friendship deepened into something more profound with each passing day. Mackenzie found herself watching for Yates, her heart quickening whenever their eyes met across the corral or dinner table. For his part, Yates found countless small ways to lighten her burdens, completing chores before she could get to them, bringing wildflowers he'd found while checking the cattle, creating diversions when Vernon's temper flared. Vernon, consumed with his own affairs and pleased with the increased productivity Yates brought to the ranch, remained oblivious to the growing connection between them. The summer cattle drive was approaching, and preparations consumed everyone's attention. One evening in late June, with Vernon away at a livestock auction in Sacramento for 3 days, Mackenzie and Yates sat on the porch after supper, watching fireflies rise from the meadow as darkness fell. "Tell me more about your mother," Yates said, his voice gentle in the twilight. "You speak of her with such love." Mackenzie smiled, the memories bittersweet but precious. "She was remarkable, strong but gentle. She could shoot a rifle as well as any man, but also grew the most beautiful roses you've ever seen. She taught me to read and write, to ride and rope, to bake bread and birth calves. She paused, remembering. Most of all, she taught me to value my own mind. She always said, "Speak your truth, Mackenzie, even when your voice shakes." Wise words, Yates murmured. She would be proud of how you've honored them. Sometimes I wonder, Mackenzie admitted. Would she approve of how I've let Vernon take control? Should I have fought harder, found a way to maintain my parents' legacy without compromise? Yates considered her words carefully. You've done what you needed to survive in an impossible situation. There's no shame in that. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the night sounds of the ranch surrounding them. What will you do when you gain control of your inheritance? Yates asked finally. The question startled her. Few people bothered to consider her future beyond her current circumstances. Restore what Vernon has neglected. Rebuild the herds, repair the buildings, replant the orchards. Make Willow Creek the thriving place it once was. Alone. The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Mackenzie turned to look at him, his features half shadowed in the fading light. "I've always assumed I would have to," she said softly. "Few men would be content with a wife who insists on managing her own property." Yates's hand found hers on the porch railing, his touch warm and steady. Some men might consider it the greatest privilege of their lives. Her heart stuttered at the implication in his words. "Yates." He moved closer, his eyes serious in the deepening dusk. "Mackenzie, I need to tell you something. The reason I came to Eureka, to this ranch specifically," the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted him. They both stiffened, hands pulling apart as they stood. "Vernon's not due back until tomorrow," Mackenzie said, squinting into the darkness. "Who could?" The rider came into view, Tom Wilson, the shopkeeper's son, pushing his horse hard up the drive. "Miss Turner," he called, reining in. "Thank goodness you're here. There's been trouble in Sacramento. Your uncle's been hurt." Mackenzie's stomach dropped. "Hurt? How badly?" "Pretty bad from what I heard. Got himself into a fight at a saloon, fell and hit his head. Doctor there says he needs family to come. Mayor asked me to ride out and tell you." Yates stepped forward. "I'll go with you to Sacramento, Miss Turner." Tom shook his head. "Mayor said to tell you Mr. Logan should stay and watch the ranch. Can't leave the place unattended with rustlers about." Mackenzie's mind raced. She had no love for her uncle, but she couldn't refuse to go to him. Yet the thought of traveling alone to Sacramento, leaving Yates behind when they'd been on the verge of something important, filled her with regret. "When do I need to leave?" "First stage out of Eureka tomorrow morning," Tom replied. "I can escort you to town tonight if you'd like, so you're ready." She glanced at Yates, seeing the concern and frustration in his eyes. "Give me an hour to pack some things, Tom. I'll be ready." As Tom went to water his horse, Yates followed Mackenzie into the house. "I don't like this," he said quietly. "You traveling alone." "I'll be fine. The stage is safe enough." She began gathering items she would need for the journey. Yates watched her, his expression troubled. "Whatever I was about to say on the porch, it'll keep until you return." She paused in her packing, looking up at him. "Will you still be here?" The question contained all her fears that this interruption would break whatever had been building between them, that she would return to find him gone, that the brief happiness she'd found in his presence was as transient as everything else good in her life. Yates crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Mackenzie Turner, wild horses couldn't drag me from this ranch while you're away. I'll be right here waiting when you return." The simple promise eased something in her chest. "Thank you." An hour later, with her small carpet bag packed and final instructions given to Yates about the ranch's operations, Mackenzie climbed into Tom's wagon for the ride to Eureka. As they pulled away, she looked back at the silhouette of Yates standing on the porch, his tall figure outlined against the lamplight from within. Something told her that everything would change during her absence for better or worse. She couldn't say. The journey to Sacramento was long and uncomfortable. The stagecoach bounced over rough roads for 2 days, with overnight stops at way stations that offered little in the way of comfort or privacy. Mackenzie had time to think about Vernon, about the ranch, and most of all about Yates Logan and what he might have been about to tell her on the porch. When she finally reached Sacramento, she found Vernon at the doctor's home where he was recuperating. His head was bandaged, and he looked paler and older than she remembered, but his injuries were less severe than Tom had suggested. "Good of you to come, girl," he said gruffly when she entered his room. "Doctor says I can travel in another day or two. What happened?" Mackenzie asked, taking a seat beside his bed. Vernon shifted uncomfortably. "Disagreement over a card game. Other fellow accused me of cheating. In the scuffle, I fell and hit my head on a table edge." The story had a familiar ring. Vernon's temper and fondness for gambling had landed him in trouble before. Mackenzie felt a flash of resentment that she'd been summoned for what amounted to a barroom brawl, but she kept her expression neutral. "The ranch is in good hands," she assured him. "Mr. Logan knows what needs to be done," Vernon grunted. "That Cowboy's worked out better than I expected. Might offer him a permanent position come fall." The prospect of Yates remaining at Willow Creek sent a flutter of hope through Mackenzie's heart, but she said nothing. For the next 2 days, she tended to Vernon, listened to his complaints, and prepared for the journey home. Sacramento was larger and more bustling than Eureka, and in other circumstances, she might have enjoyed exploring the city. As it was, she spent her free hours thinking of Yates and the future. On the 3rd morning, as they prepared to board the stage back to Eureka, Vernon made an announcement that shattered her tentative happiness. "While I was here, I met with an old acquaintance, Harold Mercer. Wealthy man, owns half the shipping business on the Sacramento River. Widower with grown children. He's looking for a wife, and I suggested you might suit." Mackenzie froze, her carpetbag halfway to the stage. "You did what? Don't take that tone with me, girl. Mercer's coming to Eureka next month to look over the ranch and meet you properly. He's interested in expanding his investments into cattle, and joining our properties through marriage makes good business sense." "Business sense?" Mackenzie's voice rose despite her effort to control it. "You're arranging my marriage like it's a cattle sale." Vernon's face darkened. "Watch yourself, Mackenzie. This is a respectable offer from a respectable man. You should be grateful. Mercer's agreed to keep you on at Willow Creek if you wish, though he'd prefer you move to his home in Sacramento." "And if I refuse?" "You won't," Vernon said flatly. "You're 22, girl. It's time you were settled. Besides, once you're married, my guardianship ends. Isn't that what you want?" The cruel irony wasn't lost on Mackenzie. Vernon was offering her freedom from his control, but only by transferring that control to another man, a stranger 3 times her age whom she'd never met. "We'll discuss this further at home," she said tightly, climbing into the stagecoach. During the long journey back to Eureka, Mackenzie's mind churned with turmoil. The prospect of being forced into marriage with Harold Mercer filled her with dread. Yet if she refused, Vernon would remain her guardian, continuing to mismanage the ranch and control her life. Neither option was bearable. As the stage rolled into Eureka on the afternoon of the 6th day since she'd left Willow Creek, Mackenzie had reached a decision. Somehow, she would find a way out of this impossible situation. She just needed time to think, to plan, and to talk to Yates. Vernon had arranged for a wagon to meet them at the stage stop. To Mackenzie's disappointment, it wasn't Yates but Jeb Miller, a local farmer who occasionally helped at the ranch. Vernon explained that he'd sent a telegram ahead, asking Yates to prepare for their return by slaughtering a calf for a celebration dinner. "Celebration?" Mackenzie asked warily. "Your engagement, of course," Vernon said, as if it were already settled. "We'll announce it to the town next Sunday at church, before Mercer arrives." Mackenzie bit her tongue, knowing that arguing in public would only make matters worse. The ride home felt interminable, her anxiety growing with every mile. When they finally arrived at Willow Creek, the sun was setting, painting the valley in hues of gold and crimson. The ranch looked peaceful, well tended in their absence. Mackenzie's eyes searched for Yates as the wagon rolled to a stop, and her heart leapt when he emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. He crossed to the wagon quickly, helping Vernon down first with careful respect, then turning to offer Mackenzie his hand. As their fingers touched, a current of awareness passed between them, and the message in his eyes was clear. He was glad she was home. "Everything's in order, Mr. Turner," Yates reported. "No problems while you were away. Dinner's nearly ready as you requested." Vernon nodded approval. "Good man. Help Jeb unload our things, then join us inside. We've got news to celebrate." As Vernon headed for the house, Yates turned to Mackenzie. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "No," she whispered. "But I can't talk now, later," he nodded, understanding without explanation. "I'll find you." Dinner was a strained affair. Vernon dominated the conversation, describing Sacramento, his recovery, and most of all the virtues of Harold Mercer. Yates sat silently across from Mackenzie, his face carefully neutral as Vernon outlined the proposed marriage arrangement. "Mercer's agreed to a generous settlement," Vernon explained between bites of roast beef. "He'll invest in expanding our herds and improving the property. As Mackenzie's husband, he'll naturally assume management of Willow Creek, but he understands the value of keeping family involved. I'll stay on as foreman." Mackenzie pushed food around her plate, unable to eat. The future Vernon described was a nightmare, trapped in a loveless marriage with a stranger, watching as two men she didn't trust controlled her family's legacy. "When is Mr. Mercer expected to arrive?" Yates asked, his voice neutral. 3 weeks' time. Gives us a chance to make the place presentable." Vernon turned to Mackenzie. "You'll need a new dress, girl. Something suitable for meeting your future husband." She couldn't bear it another moment. "Please excuse me," she said, rising abruptly. "The journey has tired me. I need to rest." Without waiting for Vernon's permission, she fled to her room, closing the door and leaning against it, fighting tears of frustration and despair. How had her life come to this? After all the years of enduring Vernon's tyranny, was her only escape to be delivered into the hands of another controlling man? A soft knock at her window startled her. Yates stood outside in the darkness, concern etched on his features. Mackenzie quickly opened the window. "Can you come out?" he whispered. "To the old oak by the creek. Your uncle's settled in the study with his whiskey. He won't notice." Mackenzie nodded. "Give me 5 minutes." She waited until she heard Vernon snoring from the study, then slipped out the back door and hurried across the moonlit pasture to the ancient oak that stood sentinel over the creek. Yates was waiting, a dark silhouette against the silver-spangled water. "Mackenzie," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I've been worried sick since I heard Vernon's plans." "He arranged it without even consulting me," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush of anger and fear. "This Harold Mercer is old enough to be my father, a complete stranger. Vernon's practically sold me to secure his own position." Yates stepped closer, his face grave in the moonlight. "We need to talk. There's something I should have told you before you left." "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I didn't come to Willow Creek by accident." I came looking specifically for you. Mackenzie stared at him, confusion replacing her distress. For me? But how did you even know I existed? I met your cousin Sarah in Denver last year. She was visiting with her husband and mentioned her concerns about you living under Vernon's control, being isolated here. She showed me a photograph of you and told me about Willow Creek Ranch. Sarah, Mackenzie hadn't seen her mother's niece in years. But why would that make you seek me out? Yates ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking uncertain. It sounds presumptuous now, but something in Sarah's description of you, something in that photograph. I felt drawn to know you. When my last job ended, I decided to come to Eureka to see if I could help somehow. So you deliberately sought employment with my uncle. The revelation was startling, though not unwelcome. Yes, I told myself I just wanted to make sure you were all right, that Sarah's concerns were exaggerated. But from the moment I saw you that first day, he paused, searching for words. Mackenzie, I've never believed in love at first sight. It seemed like a notion from dime novels. But when I saw you stand up to your uncle, when I heard you speak your mind despite the consequences, something changed for me. Mackenzie's heart was racing. Why didn't you tell me this before? I wanted to earn your trust first. I didn't want you to think I was interfering or had ulterior motives. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. I was going to tell you the night you left for Sacramento, then Vernon's accident interrupted us. The touch of his hand steadied her, anchoring her in the midst of confusion. I don't understand what this means for our situation now. Yates's eyes held hers, serious in the moonlight. It means you have options, Mackenzie, more than you realize. What options? Vernon is determined to see me married to Mercer. Marry me instead. The simple proposal hung in the night air between them. Mackenzie stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she'd heard. What? Marry me? Yates repeated, his voice stronger. Not just to escape Mercer, though that's reason enough. Marry me because I love you, Mackenzie Turner. Because in the short time I've known you, you've become the center of my world. Because I want to spend my life listening to your voice, supporting your dreams, building something beautiful with you here at Willow Creek. Tears filled Mackenzie's eyes, not of despair now, but of overwhelmed emotion. Yates, we hardly know each other. We know what matters, he said gently. We know we share the same values, the same vision for this land. We know we work well together, respect each other, and I hope you feel something of what I feel when we're together. I do, she whispered, admitting it aloud for the first time, but Vernon will never approve. He said on Mercer, once you're married, Vernon's guardianship ends. That's the law. If we marry before Mercer arrives, there's nothing he can do about it. The boldness of the plan took her breath away. You're suggesting we elope? Yates nodded. There's a judge in Hornbrook who's a friend of mine. He could marry us legally without delay. We could leave tomorrow while Vernon's still recovering, be back as husband and wife before he can stop us. And then what? Vernon would be furious. Yes, but powerless. As your husband, I would become the legal manager of your inheritance. We could offer Vernon a choice: stay on as a hired hand with clearly defined responsibilities, or leave with a fair settlement. Either way, you'd be free of his control. Mackenzie's mind raced with the possibilities. Marriage to Yates would solve her immediate problem, freeing her from both Vernon's guardianship and the threat of being wed to Harold Mercer. But more than that, it offered a future she hadn't dared to imagine: a partnership with a man who respected her mind, valued her strength, and loved her for exactly who she was. This is happening so fast, she said, though her heart had already made its decision. Yates lifted a hand to her cheek, his touch infinitely gentle. I know, and if you need time to think, I understand, But Mercer is coming in 3 weeks, and Vernon will only increase the pressure until then. I don't need time, Mackenzie said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I've lived 6 years under Vernon's thumb, watching him dismantle everything my parents built. I won't spend another day there if I have a choice. She took a deep breath. Yes, Yates Logan, I will marry you. The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Without words, he drew her into his arms, and when his lips found hers, Mackenzie knew she had made the right decision. The kiss was tender but sure, a promise of all that could be between them. When they finally drew apart, both breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow, then," he whispered. "I'll have the horses ready at dawn. Pack only what you need for a day's journey." "Tomorrow," she agreed. "A new beginning." They formulated their plan carefully. Yates would prepare the horses early, as was his usual habit. Mackenzie would leave a note for Vernon, explaining that she had gone to visit her mother's grave at the small church cemetery a few miles away, something she did periodically, and that wouldn't arouse suspicion. By the time Vernon realized they were truly gone, they would be well on their way to Hornbrook. Returning to the house was difficult, knowing it would be her last night under Vernon's roof as his ward. Despite her certainty about marrying Yates, the magnitude of what they were planning left Mackenzie both exhilarated and terrified. Sleep eluded her as she packed a small bag with essential items and the few keepsakes from her parents that she couldn't bear to leave behind. Dawn arrived with a pearly light that promised a beautiful day. Mackenzie dressed quickly in her sturdiest riding clothes, pinned up her hair, and slipped out of her room with her bag. The house was silent. Vernon never rose before 7, especially when he'd been drinking the night before. She left the note on the kitchen table, then made her way to the barn where Yates waited with Thunder and his own horse, already saddled and ready to go. "Ready?" he asked softly, his eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt. Mackenzie nodded. "Yes." They led the horses out quietly, mounted up at a safe distance from the house, and rode out just as the sun crested the eastern mountains, bathing Willow Creek Ranch in golden light. Mackenzie looked back once at the only home she'd ever known, then turned her face forward toward the future. The ride to Hornbrook took most of the morning. They kept to back trails rather than the main road, reducing the chance of being seen by anyone who might report to Vernon. Yates was a comfortable traveling companion, neither pressing Mackenzie to talk when she was lost in thought, nor leaving uncomfortable silences. They discussed practical matters, how they would handle Vernon's inevitable anger, their plans for restoring the ranch, their hopes for the future. By the time they reached Hornbrook, a small settlement north of Eureka, Mackenzie felt a calm certainty about their decision. Whatever challenges lay ahead, facing them with Yates at her side seemed not just possible, but right. The judge, a kindly older man named Emerson Raid, welcomed them warmly to his small home office. "Yates told me something of your situation when he visited me last week," he explained to Mackenzie. "Rest assured, young lady, this marriage will be completely legal and binding. Once the license is signed and registered, your uncle's guardianship is terminated by law." Last week. Mackenzie glanced at Yates, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I came to make inquiries while you were in Sacramento," he admitted. "I wanted to be certain of the legal details before proposing." Judge Reed performed the ceremony in his parlor, with his wife and elderly clerk as witnesses. It was simple but dignified, with Mackenzie holding a small bouquet of wildflowers Yates had gathered along the trail. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, and Yates kissed her with gentle reverence, Mackenzie felt a sense of homecoming that had nothing to do with Willow Creek Ranch. "Well, Mrs. "Logan," Yates said as they mounted their horses for the journey home, the marriage certificate safely stored in his saddlebag. "Shall we go face the music?" Mackenzie smiled, the new name warming her heart. "I think we'd better, Mr. Logan." They rode back toward Willow Creek, taking their time, stopping for a simple wedding meal of bread, cheese, and apples beside a mountain stream. By unspoken agreement, they savored these peaceful hours together before the confrontation that awaited them. It was late afternoon when they approached the ranch. From a distance, they could see Vernon pacing on the porch, clearly agitated. A horse was tied to the hitching post Jeb Miller's bay gelding. "He sent Jeb looking for us," Mackenzie said. "I'm surprised he noticed we were gone so quickly." Yates reached over to squeeze her hand. "Whatever happens next, remember we're legally married. He has no power over you anymore." Vernon spotted them as they rode into the yard. His face contorted with rage as he stormed down the porch steps. "Where the hell have you been?" he bellowed. "Your note said the cemetery. That was hours ago." His eyes narrowed as he took in their formal clothes and the flowers still tucked into Mackenzie's belt. "What's going on here?" Mackenzie and Yates dismounted, standing shoulder to face him. She drew strength from Yates's solid presence beside her. "Uncle Vernon, I'd like to introduce you to my husband, Yates Logan. We were married today in Hornbrook by Judge Reed." Vernon's face went from red to purple. "Husband?" "You treacherous little—" He lunged toward Mackenzie, hand raised to strike. Yates moved with lightning speed, stepping between them and catching Vernon's wrist before the blow could land. "That's enough," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "You will never raise a hand to my wife again." Vernon struggled against Yates's grip, but the younger man was stronger. "You planned this, you bastard. Coming here, worming your way in, stealing what's mine." "The ranch was never yours," Mackenzie said firmly. "It belonged to my parents and was held in trust for me. Now it belongs to Yates and me as husband and wife." "I'll contest the marriage," Vernon sputtered. "Coercion, deception." "Judge Reed anticipated that accusation," Yates said calmly, releasing Vernon's wrist and stepping back. "That's why he had 3 witnesses sign statements confirming Mackenzie entered into this marriage of her own free will, with full understanding of its implications." Vernon looked from one to the other, realizing he was outmaneuvered. His shoulders sagged slightly, but the malice remained in his eyes. "What now? You throw me out after all I've done for this place?" "For you." Mackenzie exchanged a glance with Yates, who nodded for her to continue as they had planned. "We're prepared to offer you a choice, Uncle Vernon," she said. "You can stay on as a paid employee of Willow Creek Ranch, with clearly defined responsibilities and fair compensation. Or, if you prefer to leave, we'll provide a settlement that acknowledges your years of work here." "And if I refuse both options?" "Then yes, we will ask you to leave immediately with only what legally belongs to you," Yates said firmly. Vernon's eyes darted between them, calculating. Finally, he spat on the ground at their feet. "I'll take the settlement. I want nothing more to do with either of you. But mark my words, you'll run this place into the ground without me." Mackenzie felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Despite his bitter words, Vernon had accepted the new reality more quickly than she'd expected. Perhaps he'd known all along that his position was tenuous, that his guardianship would eventually end. "We'll draw up the agreement tomorrow," Yates said. "In the meantime, I suggest we all get some rest. It's been a long day." That night, after Vernon had retreated to his room with a bottle of whiskey, Mackenzie and Yates sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The day's events seemed almost dreamlike now, the dawn escape, the wedding, the confrontation. "Are you having regrets?" Yates asked softly, his arm warm around her shoulders. Mackenzie leaned into him, finding comfort in his solid presence. "Not about marrying you, but I wish things could have ended differently with Vernon. He's my father's brother, after all, the only family I have left." "Family is more than blood," Yates reminded her gently. "It's love, respect, shared values. Vernon may be your blood relative, but he hasn't treated you as family should." "You're right." She turned to face him, studying the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time. "You're my family now, Yates Logan." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face with tender fingers. "And you're mine, Mackenzie Logan, the only family I need." The kiss they shared beneath the starlit sky sealed their commitment to each other, and to the future they would build together at Willow Creek Ranch. The next morning, they rose early to find Vernon already packing his belongings. His night of drinking had left him haggard but seemingly resigned to the new arrangement. With surprising efficiency, they drafted and signed a settlement agreement, with Jeb Miller brought in as a witness. Vernon would receive a cash payment and one of the smaller breeding herd's generous terms that acknowledged his years at Willow Creek, while allowing Mackenzie and Yates to retain the core of the ranch's assets. "I'll be gone by noon," Vernon announced gruffly after signing the document. "Jeb's agreed to let me stay at his place until I find somewhere permanent." Mackenzie nodded, relief and sadness mingling as she watched her last blood relative prepare to leave. Despite everything, a part of her mourned the relationship they might have had in different circumstances. As Vernon loaded his wagon, Mackenzie approached him one last time. "Uncle Vernon," she said quietly, "I wish you well, truly." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his bloodshot eyes. "You're like your mother," he said finally, "stubborn as a mule and twice as smart. She'd be proud of you standing up for yourself." It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd ever given her. Without waiting for her response, he climbed onto the wagon seat, snapped the reins, and drove away from Willow Creek Ranch for the last time. Yates came to stand beside her as they watched the wagon disappear down the road. "Are you all right?" Mackenzie took a deep breath of the clear mountain air, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Yes, it's strange, but yes, it feels like I can finally breathe." He slipped an arm around her waist. "So, Mrs. Logan, what shall we do first on our ranch?" The question made her smile. Their ranch, not Vernon's, not her parents', theirs. "First," she said decisively, "I want to write to Harold Mercer and inform him that I'm no longer available for marriage." Yates laughed, the sound warm and rich in the morning sunlight. "An excellent first decision as the mistress of Willow Creek." They walked back to the house together, making plans for the work ahead. There was much to be done: fences to mend, buildings to repair, herds to rebuild. But now, for the first time since her parents' deaths, Mackenzie faced the future with hope rather than dread. In the weeks that followed, they settled into a rhythm as natural as if they'd been partners for years rather than days. Yates proved to be everything Mackenzie had glimpsed during their brief courtship: hardworking, intelligent, respectful of her knowledge and opinions. They made decisions together, combining his experience from different ranches with her deep understanding of Willow Creek's particular needs. Word of their marriage spread quickly through Yreka and the surrounding area. Some townspeople were scandalized by the elopement and Vernon's abrupt departure, but others, especially those who had witnessed Vernon's treatment of Mackenzie over the years, expressed quiet approval. Harold Mercer arrived as scheduled 3 weeks later, unaware of the changes at Willow Creek. His shock at finding Mackenzie newly married was profound, but when she explained the circumstances frankly, the older man surprised her with his understanding. "Turner never mentioned you had a suitor already," he said, studying Yates with shrewd eyes. "Though I can't say I blame you for choosing a younger man. Had I known, I wouldn't have agreed to the arrangement in the first place." Before he left, Mercer even proposed a business partnership. His shipping connections combined with their cattle operation could benefit both enterprises. It was an unexpected outcome, but one that Mackenzie and Yates cautiously agreed to explore. As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, Willow Creek Ranch began to thrive under their joint stewardship. They worked from dawn to dusk, exhausting but deeply satisfying labor that brought visible results. The dilapidated barn was repaired, fallen fences mended, the orchards pruned and tended. They hired 2 young ranch hands to help with the increased workload, creating a small but dedicated team. Their marriage deepened alongside their commitment to the land. The hasty wedding, based on practical necessity and burgeoning feelings, evolved into a profound partnership grounded in mutual respect, shared purpose, and deepening love. Mackenzie found in Yates not just a protector from Vernon's cruelty, but a true companion who valued her voice, her mind, and her strength. On Christmas Eve, 6 months after their wedding, they sat before the fire in the cozy ranch house parlor. Outside, snow blanketed Willow Creek in pristine white, but inside all was warmth and contentment. Mackenzie had decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, recreating the holiday traditions her mother had established. "I have something for you," Yates said, pulling a small package from behind a cushion. "It's not much, but—" Mackenzie unwrapped the gift carefully, a beautiful leather-bound journal with her new initials, ML, embossed in gold on the cover. "For your thoughts, your dreams, your plans for Willow Creek," Yates explained. "Your voice deserves to be preserved, Mackenzie. It's still the most beautiful sound I know." Tears stung her eyes as she traced the initials with her finger. "Thank you, it's perfect." "There's more," he said, a hint of nervousness in his tone. "Look inside." She opened the journal to find a folded document tucked into the first pages. As she unfolded it, she realized it was the deed to Willow Creek Ranch, newly registered in both their names equally. "Yates," she whispered, understanding the significance. Although their marriage had made him the legal manager of her inheritance under California law, this document gave her equal legal standing as an owner. It was a profound statement of trust and partnership. "I want to be sure that no matter what happens, you always have control of your family's legacy," he said simply. "This ranch is yours by birthright. I'm just honored to share it with you." Mackenzie set aside the journal and deed and moved into his arms. "I love you, Yates Logan." "Not for this," she gestured to the papers, "though it means more than I can say, but for who you are, the man who saw value in my voice when everyone else tried to silence it." "I love you too," he murmured against her hair, "more than I knew was possible." Spring came early to the Shasta Valley in 1877. The mountains shrugged off their snow cover, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and Willow Creek rushed with snowmelt. On a perfect April morning, Mackenzie stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching as Yates worked with a spirited young colt in the corral. His patience with the animal was remarkable, each movement a careful conversation rather than a demand for obedience. She rested a hand on her stomach, still flat but harboring a secret she'd confirmed with the town doctor just yesterday. In 7 months, their family would grow. The thought filled her with both joy and trepidation. Her own mother had died young, leaving Mackenzie without female guidance at a crucial time. Could she be the mother her child needed? Yates looked up, catching her eye across the yard. Even after nearly a year of marriage, that simple connection still sent warmth spreading through her. He said something to the young ranch hand working nearby, then made his way to the porch. "You're thinking mighty hard about something," he observed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Care to share?" Mackenzie smiled, taking his hand and placing it gently on her abdomen. "What do you think about adding another voice to our family conversation?" Yates's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Mackenzie, are you saying?" "Yes. Dr. Jenkins confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby come November." The joy that transformed his face was all the reassurance she needed. Yates lifted her off her feet in a gentle embrace, laughing with delight. "A baby," he marveled, setting her carefully back down. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to describe it. He cupped her face in his hands. "You've given me everything I never dared hope for, Mackenzie, a home, a purpose, your love, and now a child. I'm the most fortunate man in all of California." She leaned into his touch. "I'm a little scared," she admitted. "My mother died when I was 16. I'm not sure I know how to be a good mother." "You'll be wonderful," Yates assured her. "You're the strongest, most loving woman I know. Our child will be blessed to have you as a mother. And you as a father." They stood together on the porch of the home they had reclaimed and renewed, looking out over the land they had nurtured back to prosperity, imagining the future they would build for their child. "Boy or girl, I hope they have your spirit," Yates said, his arm warm around her waist. "And your voice never afraid to speak the truth. With us both as parents, how could they be anything else?" Mackenzie smiled, leaning into his embrace. The seasons turned, bringing change to Willow Creek Ranch. By summer's end, Mackenzie's condition was obvious, her slender frame now curved with the promise of new life. The ranch continued to thrive under their care, with a successful cattle sale bringing the financial security they'd worked so hard to achieve. In late August, they received unexpected news from Erica. Vernon Turner had died suddenly of a heart attack while playing cards at the saloon. Despite their strained relationship, Mackenzie insisted on attending the funeral, standing beside Yates as her uncle was laid to rest near her parents in the small cemetery. "I keep thinking about what might have been different," she confided to Yates as they rode home afterward. "If he'd been a different man, or if I'd somehow found a way to reach him." "Some people can't be reached, Mackenzie," Yates said gently. "Vernon made his choices just as we've made ours. All we can do is move forward." As Vernon had no wife or children, his modest estate, primarily the settlement from Willow Creek, plus some gambling winnings, came to Mackenzie as his only living relative. She decided to use the unexpected inheritance to establish a small school on the ranch, hiring a teacher from Sacramento to educate their child and the children of neighboring ranchers who had no easy access to Erica's school. "My mother always believed education was the greatest gift," she explained to Yates. "This feels like the right way to honor both her memory and, in some small way, Uncle Vernon's role in our family's story." Yates embraced the idea wholeheartedly, helping to convert an unused storage building into a bright, welcoming schoolhouse. By October, as Mackenzie's time grew near, the little school was ready, with 6 students enrolled for lessons beginning after the harvest season. November brought the first snowfall, and with it, the birth of their son. After a long, difficult labor that tested both Mackenzie's strength and Yates's composure, William James Logan entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to his father's eyes. "Listen to that voice," Yates said in wonder, holding his son for the first time. Strong and clear, just like his mother's. Mackenzie, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at the 2 great loves of her life. "He's perfect, isn't he, our little William?" "Named for your father and mine," Yates said softly. "A bridge between past and future." The winter passed in a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and infinite wonder at the tiny life they'd created. William, Will, as they came to call him, was a good-natured baby with his father's storm-gray eyes and his mother's determined spirit. By spring, He was smiling and cooing, responding with particular delight to the sound of Mackenzie's voice as she sang to him, or told him stories of his grandparents and the ranch that would someday be his inheritance. Life settled into a new pattern, different from before but no less satisfying. Mackenzie balanced motherhood with ranch responsibilities, sometimes carrying Will in a sling as she worked in the garden or oversaw the ranch accounts. Yates proved to be an attentive father, often bringing the baby with him for the safer ranch chores, narrating everything he did as if Will could understand. "He needs to learn early," Yates explained when Mackenzie teased him about it. "Besides, he likes the sound of voices. Have you noticed how he watches when we talk? He's going to be a good listener before he becomes a speaker himself." In May of 1878, shortly after Will's 6-month milestone, they hosted a gathering at Willow Creek Ranch to celebrate the completion of the new schoolhouse and the prosperous year they'd enjoyed. Neighbors from surrounding ranches came with their families, along with townspeople from Irica who had become friends and business associates. As Mackenzie moved among their guests, Will balanced on her hip, she marveled at how much had changed in just 2 years. From a virtual prisoner in her own home, silenced and abused by her uncle, she had transformed into a respected rancher's wife, a mother, a woman whose voice was heard and valued in the community. Later, as twilight settled over the valley and guests began to depart, Mackenzie found Yates standing alone by the corral, watching the last colors of sunset fade from the western sky. "Penny for your thoughts, husband," she said, coming to stand beside him. Will had finally succumbed to sleep after the excitement of the day, tucked safely in his cradle inside. Yates smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I was just thinking about the day I arrived here. Seeing you for the first time, hearing you stand up to your uncle despite knowing what it would cost you." "I remember," Mackenzie said softly. "You said my cheek was bruised. It was, and I was furious that anyone would hurt you that way." He turned to face her fully, his expression earnest in the fading light. "I knew then that I would do anything to protect you, to help you find your freedom. What I didn't expect was how much you would give me in return. And what's that? A home, a purpose, a family." He gestured toward the ranch spread out below them, peaceful in the gloaming. "All of this, but most of all your heart, your trust, the chance to hear your voice every day for the rest of our lives." Mackenzie leaned into his embrace, overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, from strangers to allies to lovers to parents, partners in all things. "My voice is stronger because you listened when everyone else tried to silence me," she said. "You gave me the courage to speak my truth." Yates kissed her tenderly, a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future, the challenges they would face together, the joys they would celebrate, the legacy they would build for their son and perhaps other children to come. "The most beautiful sound in the world," he murmured against her lips, "is still and always will be your voice, Mackenzie Logan." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they walked hand in hand back to the house where their son slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that he would grow up hearing both his parents' voices, strong, true, and unafraid. 5 years later, on a bright summer day in 1883, Mackenzie stood on the porch of Willow Creek Ranch, watching as Yates taught 6-year-old Will to rope a practice calf. Beside her, in a rocking chair, sat their daughter, 3-year-old Elizabeth, contentedly drawing pictures with colored pencils. The ranch had prospered beyond their wildest hopes. The partnership with Harold Mercer had opened new markets for their cattle, and Yates's innovative breeding program had produced herds that commanded premium prices. The little schoolhouse now served 15 children from the surrounding area, and their teacher, Miss Eleanor Banks, had become like family. "Mama, look," Will called excitedly as he successfully looped his small rope around the practice post. "I did it. Well done, sweetheart." Mackenzie called back, her heart swelling with pride. Will was growing into a thoughtful, confident boy with his father's patience and her outspoken nature, a combination that sometimes led to interesting dinner-table debates despite his young age. "Me too, Mama," little Elizabeth insisted, holding up her drawing. "I made our family." Mackenzie bent to examine the colorful scrawls that somehow clearly represented their family, tall stick figures for the adults, smaller ones for the children, all standing beside what was unmistakably their ranch house. "It's beautiful, Lizzie. You're quite the artist." The sound of an approaching wagon drew her attention back to the yard. A smart buggy was coming up the drive, and Mackenzie recognized the driver as Sarah's husband, Robert. Her cousin Sarah and her family had moved to Irica 2 years earlier, strengthening the bond between the women who had once been close as sisters. "Will, Lizzie, Aunt Sarah's here," she called. Will abandoned his roping practice and ran to greet the visitors, while Yates helped Sarah down from the buggy. "Perfect timing," Mackenzie said, embracing her cousin. "We were just about to have lunch." As they settled around the large kitchen table, conversation flowed easily. Sarah's oldest son, Thomas, was the same age as Will, and the two boys chattered excitedly about their summer adventures. Elizabeth insisted on sitting beside Sarah's youngest daughter, her best friend, despite seeing her only once or twice a month. "The school board approved your proposal," Sarah told Mackenzie over coffee after the meal. "Starting this fall, girls will have the same access to advanced subjects as boys." It caused quite a stir among some of the older members, but your argument about equal education was compelling. Mackenzie smiled, glancing at Yates, who gave her a proud nod. Her involvement with Irica's school board had begun as a simple effort to improve their local schoolhouse, but had evolved into a passionate advocacy for girls' education throughout the county. "That's wonderful news," she said. "Every child deserves the chance to develop their mind fully, regardless of gender." After Sarah and her family departed, promising to return for the Harvest Festival in September, Mackenzie and Yates took their own children for a ride around the property, a family tradition on Sunday afternoons. Will rode his own pony now, while Elizabeth still sat securely in front of Mackenzie on Thunder's successor, a gentle mare named Star. They stopped at the high meadow that offered a panoramic view of Willow Creek Ranch. Below them stretched the lush pastures where cattle grazed, the orchards heavy with summer fruit, the cluster of buildings that had expanded over the years to include not just the schoolhouse, but also new barns, bunkhouses for the hands, and an enlarged main house to accommodate their growing family. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Yates said, his voice full of quiet satisfaction. "Everything your parents dreamed it could be and more." "Our dream now," Mackenzie replied, reaching across to take his hand. "And someday the children's." Will, overhearing, sat up straighter on his pony. "When I grow up, I want to make the ranch even bigger, and I'll never sell any of it, not ever." Yates smiled at his son's determination. "That's good thinking, son. But remember what we've taught you: the land is a trust, not just a possession. We take care of it so it can take care of future generations. And we listen to it," Mackenzie added. "The land, the animals, the people who work alongside us, they all have something important to tell us if we're wise enough to hear." Will nodded solemnly, absorbing the lesson as he always did with an intensity beyond his years. "Like when you listen to me and Lizzie even when we disagree." "Exactly like that," Yates confirmed. "Everyone's voice matters on Willow Creek Ranch. That's what makes us strong." As they rode back toward home in the golden afternoon light, Mackenzie reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the frightened, abused young woman she'd been under Vernon's thumb to the confident, respected rancher and mother, she was today, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. Yet it had happened one day at a time, one decision at a time, one spoken truth at a time. That night, after the children were asleep, Mackenzie and Yates sat on the porch swing just as they had on countless evenings over the years. The familiar rhythm of the swing, the night sounds of the ranch, the warmth of Yates's arm around her shoulders all created a cocoon of contentment that Mackenzie had once thought impossible. "I had a letter from Judge Reed today," Yates said after a comfortable silence. "He's retiring next month. Wants us to come to his farewell gathering in Hornbrook." Mackenzie smiled at the mention of the judge who had married them. "We should go. Without him, none of this might have happened." "I've been thinking about that day a lot lately," Yates admitted. "How scared we both were, how uncertain about what would happen when we returned to face Vernon. Do you ever regret not having a proper wedding, with a white dress and all your friends present?" Mackenzie turned to look at him, surprised by the question. "Not for a moment. Our wedding was perfect because it gave us exactly what we needed, each other and a future of our own making." She paused, studying his face in the moonlight. "Do you regret it?" "Never," he said firmly. "But I was thinking, for our 10th anniversary next year, what if we renewed our vows? Here at Willow Creek, with the children and all our friends. A celebration of everything we've built together." The idea appealed to her immediately, not because she had any regrets about their elopement, but because it would be a beautiful way to honor the life they'd created together. "I think that would be wonderful," she said. "A chance to say thank you to everyone who's been part of our journey." Yates kissed her temple, his lips lingering against her skin. "And a chance for me to tell you again, in front of everyone we love, that your voice is still the most beautiful sound in my world." Mackenzie leaned into his embrace, overwhelmed with gratitude for this man who had risked everything to save her from a life of silence and submission, who had partnered with her to create something so much greater than either could have built alone. "I love you, Yates Logan," she whispered. "Thank you for hearing me when no one else would listen." "I love you, Mackenzie Logan," he replied. "Thank you for speaking your truth, even when it was dangerous to do so." Together, they sat in the velvet darkness, listening to the night sounds of the ranch they had transformed through love, labor, and the courage to speak their minds. Above them, stars wheeled in the vast California sky, witnessing their contentment and the promise of all the years to come, years filled with challenges and joys, growth and change. And always, always, the harmony of their voices joined in love's endless conversation.